Thomas Jefferson was a very important man in the founding of the United States. In the year 1776, he played a key role in creating a new country. He was the main writer of the Declaration of Independence. This special document, written in Philadelphia, announced to the entire world that America wanted to be a free nation, separate from the rule of England. His ideas were fresh and exciting, offering hope for a different kind of future. In the Declaration, Jefferson penned some of the most powerful and famous words in history. He clearly stated, "We believe these truths are clear, that all men are created equal." He also wrote that people have certain rights from their Creator that governments cannot take away. These very important rights include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These phrases meant that everyone should have freedom and the chance to live a fulfilling life. They became the core ideas for the new country, inspiring many to fight for fairness and liberty. Beyond the Declaration, Jefferson strongly believed in religious freedom for everyone. He helped write the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. This was an important law in the state of Virginia, making it clear that the government could not force anyone to follow a specific religion or belief. It truly meant that people could practice any faith they chose, or even have no religious beliefs, without any fear or punishment. Jefferson considered this freedom of mind a fundamental human right, a groundbreaking concept for his era, which deeply influenced America's approach to individual liberty. He also held a very clear dream for the future of America. Jefferson imagined a country made up mainly of independent farmers. He believed that if people owned their own piece of land and worked it themselves, they would be truly self-sufficient and free. These self-reliant farmers would not be controlled by powerful aristocrats or city merchants. He thought this agrarian lifestyle would keep America strong, honest, and truly democratic. He saw this vision as a protection against the social problems he had observed in older European nations like France and England. His belief in westward expansion, like the Louisiana Purchase, was part of making this dream possible for more people. 2. A different life at home. Thomas Jefferson's beautiful home, Monticello, stood on a mountaintop. This famous house, with its grand design, was not built by free workers. Instead, enslaved people built Monticello. They also did all the work to run the estate. This included working in the fields, cooking, cleaning, and caring for Jefferson and his family. The life of comfort and study that Jefferson enjoyed was only possible because of their forced labor. Throughout his life, Jefferson owned many enslaved people. He had over 600 people in total. Many of them came from his family or his wife's family. Some were inherited from his father. Others came from his wife's father, who had one of Virginia's largest slaveholdings. Jefferson even thought about enslaved women having children as a way to increase his wealth. He wrote that a woman who had a child every 2 years was more valuable than a good male worker. Her children added to his capital. The work at Monticello was very hard. Enslaved children, some as young as 10 years old, worked in a nail factory. This factory was near Jefferson's big house. These children hammered iron into nails for 10 to 14 hours every day. They made thousands of nails each day in the hot, smoky room. Jefferson himself checked their work carefully. He wanted to make sure they were productive. Many of these boys, if they survived this difficult work, later learned skilled trades like carpentry or blacksmithing. This was not for their benefit, but because skilled enslaved people were worth more money. Enslaved families lived in constant fear at Monticello. They could be separated at any time. If Jefferson needed money, he would sell people. This often meant families were broken apart forever. For example, he sold 71 people in 1 year from 2 of his farms. In his lifetime, he sold more than 110 enslaved people for financial reasons. When Jefferson died, he had many debts. Because of this, 130 enslaved people were sold at an auction in the cold winter of January 1827. Families who had lived together for many years were sold to different buyers. They were sent far away to places like Virginia, Ohio, and Illinois. This shows a very different side to the man who wrote about freedom and equality. 3. A secret family. Thomas Jefferson had a very complex relationship with an enslaved woman named Sally Hemings. Sally was the half-sister of Jefferson's wife. This meant that Sally's father was also Jefferson's father-in-law. Sally was born into slavery at Monticello. The Hemings family held special roles at Monticello, working as skilled helpers and in the house. In 1787, Thomas Jefferson traveled to Paris, France. He was the American minister there. Sally Hemings went with him. In France, slavery was not allowed by law. This meant that Sally was free in Paris. When it was time to go back to Virginia, Sally did not want to return to slavery. She had a choice to stay free. Jefferson made a deal with Sally. He promised that if she came back to Virginia with him, he would free their children when they became 21 years old. This was a very important promise for an enslaved woman. Sally accepted his offer and returned to Monticello. Their relationship lasted for over 30 years. Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings had 6 children together. In 1998, DNA evidence showed that Jefferson was the father of at least one of Sally's children, Eston Hemings. Later, it became widely accepted that he was the father of all 6 children. The Thomas Jefferson Foundation, which manages Monticello, confirmed this by 2000. It is important to remember that Sally Hemings was an enslaved person. Jefferson had all the power over her and her children. Even if there was a connection between them, Sally could not truly say no to him because of her status as his property. Their relationship happened in a time when she was not free to choose. Thomas Jefferson freed very few enslaved people in his lifetime or in his will. Out of more than 600 people he enslaved, only 7 were freed by him. All of these 7 people were from the Hemings family. This included Sally's 4 surviving children, her brother John Hemmings, and his sons Joseph Fawcett and Burwell Colbert. Sally herself was allowed to live freely after Jefferson's death, but she was not formally freed in his will. This shows how unique the Hemmings family's situation was compared to all the other enslaved people at Monticello. 4. 2 different ideas. Thomas Jefferson had 2 very different ideas about slavery. On the one hand, he saw it as a great evil. He often wrote that slavery was a moral depravity and a hideous blot on America. He believed it went against natural law and harmed everyone involved. Jefferson even expressed fear for his country, stating, "Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever." He felt that America would face judgment for slavery. He also predicted that slavery would tear the nation apart, leading to a civil war. He once described the issue as holding a wolf by the ears, meaning it was dangerous to keep slavery, but also dangerous to let it go. But on the other hand, Jefferson also held some very different and troubling beliefs. In his book, Notes on the State of Virginia, he wrote ideas that showed deep racism. He stated that black people were not as smart as white people. He believed they had less imagination and less deep emotions. For example, he wrote that their griefs are transient, meaning their sadness did not last long. He also suggested that black people could not produce great literature or philosophy. Because of these beliefs, Jefferson did not think freed black people and white people could live together peacefully in America. He believed that if enslaved people were freed, they would need to leave the country. His plan was for them to be sent to Africa or the Caribbean. He thought this was necessary because of the deep-rooted prejudices white people had, and because black people would remember the injuries they had suffered. This idea meant that the end of slavery would need the removal of black people from American land. Jefferson's actions often showed this conflict. He helped stop bringing new enslaved people from Africa, but he did not work to end slavery itself in Virginia. He believed that ending slavery could only happen slowly and with the agreement of slave owners. So, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote powerfully about freedom for all, lived with these 2 very different and clashing ideas in his mind and in his life. 5. Why did he do it? Many people ask, why did Thomas Jefferson not free his enslaved people? He wrote strong words about freedom and equality. Yet he owned hundreds of people throughout his life at Monticello and other places. There are different ideas about why he did this. One common explanation points to his money problems. Jefferson had inherited significant debts, and his spending habits added to them. He loved building Monticello, buying many books, and pursuing scientific interests. These costs were high. Virginia law was clear. If a person owed money, their enslaved people could be sold to pay those debts. If Jefferson had freed his enslaved people, his creditors would have taken his property. This meant he could not easily free them without losing everything. He was acutely aware of this legal situation. In his will, he freed only a few people, mostly from the Hemmings family, and this required special permission from the Virginia government. This shows how difficult the legal situation was for him. Another idea centers on the historical period. In Jefferson's time, slavery was deeply a part of life in Virginia. Many wealthy farmers or planters owned enslaved people. It was how their farms and way of life worked. Some historians say that Jefferson was simply a man of his era. He grew up in a society where slavery was normal among the planter class. He inherited enslaved people, just as he inherited his social status. For some, it seemed impossible to act differently from everyone around him. However, these explanations do not tell the complete story. Not everyone agreed with slavery, even back then. Some people chose to act differently. For example, the Marquis de Lafayette, who fought alongside Jefferson in the American Revolution, strongly opposed slavery. He went further, buying enslaved people and freeing them. Also, religious groups like the Quakers were organizing against slavery very early on. They published books and asked governments to stop slavery decades before Jefferson was even born. The Pennsylvania Quakers, for instance, spoke out against slavery in 1688. Because Jefferson wrote so powerfully about human equality and freedom, many believe he should be judged by those very words. He set a high standard for himself. It seems difficult to claim to be a leader for human freedom while at the same time owning people and not working harder to end slavery. His capacity to act was greater than most, yet his actions did not match his ideals. So, understanding why Jefferson did not free his enslaved people is complex. There were laws, customs, and personal challenges. But there were also other choices that people made. His story highlights a difficult and contradictory part of America's beginning. 6. What people think now. Today, many people still talk about Thomas Jefferson. Historians who study the past have different ideas about him. For a long time, many historians saw Jefferson as a great hero. They focused on his words about freedom and equality. They often did not discuss his slave ownership much, or they said he was just a man of his time. Since the 1970s, new ideas have appeared. Some historians now see Jefferson differently. Paul Finkelman, for example, calls Jefferson a clear hypocrite. He believes Jefferson chose money and comfort over his ideas about freedom. Finkelman points out that Jefferson earned a lot from slavery. He also notes that Jefferson only freed some of the Hemmings family, not all enslaved people. Finkelman argues Jefferson's talk about ending slavery did not match his actions. He thinks Jefferson used anti-slavery words to look good while still owning people. Other historians have a more complex view. They say we must understand the difficult time Jefferson lived in. Kara Rogers Stevens, for example, believes Jefferson was truly conflicted. He had ideas he believed, but his situation made it hard to act on them. These historians argue that Jefferson's words about freedom were still very important. Later, people like abolitionists used his words to fight slavery. even if Jefferson did not free many of his own slaves. Gordon Wood suggests Jefferson showed a big problem in America. He had great ideas about human rights, but he was also a practical man, limited by money problems and Virginia's way of life. Wood thinks Jefferson's ideas were so strong that they went beyond his own time. That he could not always live up to them shows the power of those principles. Annette Gordon Reed, another important historian, says we can believe both truths. Jefferson wrote world-changing papers, but he also did things that were morally wrong. He was smart and thought deeply about freedom, but he was also a slave owner. His story shows the deep problems from America's beginning. It reminds us that great people can also have big faults. Historians continue to discuss Jefferson. They ask how to judge people from the past. Should we look at their ideals or what they did? Jefferson's life makes us think about what matters most when we look at history. 7. His words and his actions. Thomas Jefferson's story shows a clear difference between what he said and what he did. He wrote powerful words about freedom and equality, but at the same time he owned many enslaved people throughout his life. His words, especially in the Declaration of Independence, became very important. He wrote that all men are created equal and have rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These ideas were new and strong for his time. They became the main beliefs for a new country, America. Even though Jefferson did not free most of his own slaves, his words became a tool for others. People fighting against slavery used his ideas. They said that if all men are equal, then slavery must be wrong. Jefferson's words gave them a strong argument. Many groups later used these words to fight for their own rights. Abolitionists who wanted to end slavery used the Declaration. Abraham Lincoln, a famous president, also used Jefferson's words to talk about freedom. Much later, a great leader named Martin Luther King Jr. stood in Washington, D.C. He spoke about his dream for America. He used Jefferson's words from the Declaration of Independence to call for true equality for everyone. In this way, Jefferson's ideas became more powerful than his own actions. His written words lived on, even if his life did not always match them. People took his promise of equality and pushed America to be better. His words helped change the country, even after he was gone. The gap between what he wrote and how he lived is still a big part of his story, a difficult truth to understand. 8. What we learn today. Thomas Jefferson remains a very complex figure in American history. We have learned much about him through this story. He wrote powerful words about freedom and how all people are created equal. He also dreamed of a country where farmers owned their own land and were truly independent. These were revolutionary ideas that shaped America. However, his life also showed a deep problem. While he wrote about freedom, he owned more than 600 enslaved people during his lifetime. His home, Monticello, was built and run by these enslaved men, women, and children. He even sold people when he needed money, breaking up families. This creates a big contrast between his noble words and his personal actions. This difference is not easy to understand or accept, but it teaches us an important lesson. Jefferson shows us that a person can be very brilliant and have great ideas, yet also be deeply flawed. He was a smart thinker and wrote documents that inspired millions. At the same time, he took part in an unjust system that caused great suffering. His story reflects the bigger story of America itself. The United States began with very high ideals about liberty and human rights, but it also started with the huge problem of slavery. The nation was built on both these great promises and the harsh reality of human bondage. It is a difficult truth that America must always remember and face. By looking at Jefferson's full story, we learn to hold different truths together. We cannot simply praise him or simply condemn him. We must see both his greatness and his failures. This helps us understand history in a deeper way. It teaches us to appreciate the good he gave to the world, like his words about freedom. It also forces us to understand the great harms he caused or allowed. His legacy encourages us to build a better future. The work of making America truly free and equal is not finished. It is a long journey that requires continuous effort from every generation. We inherit both Jefferson's inspiring words and his painful mistakes. What we choose to do with this complex inheritance is our shared responsibility today. What do you think is the most important lesson we can learn from Thomas Jefferson's life and the contradictions within it?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world,